Welcome to 5 and 5 from the One Stop Co-op Shop, where I discuss 5 key elements of a game in about 5 minutes. I'm Michael Kelly, and today I'm looking at Shores of Tripoli. Disclaimer that I was sent a review copy of this one. Although I'm happy to jump into a super complex historical or war game, I also like the very accessible ones I can recommend to any type of player. Am I going to recommend this one? Let's find out and get to the list. So starting off, my number 5 is a bit of a mix, and that's running the AI, because of course I'm focusing on solo play here and not the 1v1 competitive play. And on the positive side, running the AI is generally quick and straightforward. A lot of time you don't even have to draw a card for them. They just raid your shipping lanes automatically because they have a lot of boats saved up, or they play one of their always available cards. And even when you do have to draw a card for them, that can be a nice thing because it varies up what they do. You're going to have surprises in which cards come out when. But that goes right into the awkward, somewhat onerous side of things, because the AI has these cards you have to always check to see if their conditions have been fulfilled, as well as these combat cards they'll play with certain conditions, and every card you draw for them, you gotta check a little table and see what do they do with this card, or when do they play this card. It's not as complex as it sounds, but at the same time it is a bit annoying, especially on your early plays. But I'm going into a pro with my number 4, which is the tactical play and the resource management here. As the US, which is the only side you can play in solo, you've got a very limited number of boats. You can build more little weak ones by spending your cards and your turns, and you get more boats as time progresses, but you have so many things to cover. You want to keep boats in Tripoli, but maybe even attack them to take out their more important big ships. You want to set the stage for a ground invasion later. You want to take out their allies. You want to protect the ships that are trying to get out of Gibraltar. There's a lot of areas for your ships to cover, and figuring out where to send them and what things you are okay with letting slip through the cracks is a great little puzzle to decide on. And tying into that is my number 3, also a pro, and that's your card management, because this is a card-driven game. And like many card-driven games, you'll have a hand of cards, and you'll either be able to play them for a specific event on the card, or play them for a generic action. And quite honestly, I'm a sucker for these types of games. I again love that resource choice of which cards you want to use and which ones to save. And a nice thing here compared to other card-driven games is that you go through your deck in a consistent fashion, so you can't get destroyed by never drawing a certain card, and that actually adds to the puzzle as well, because sometimes your best strategy can be to hold on to a card that isn't useful right now, but could be amazing in a year or two, because you don't want to discard it and then not be sure when you'll draw it again. So again, I just like the general choices with the cards overall. But I'm switching it up with a con at my number 2, the biggest one for the solo play, and that's the fact that it gets a bit repetitive. First of all is the fact that you can only play the US, which is kind of a bummer. I really wish they had taken the time to figure out a way to play either side. It would have doubled the replayability immediately. But the other big point on replay is that I think the designer leaned a little bit too much towards keeping the game historically accurate, because a whole bunch of the cards are limited to when you can play them based on year and specific conditions, which I think tends to stagnate the play of the game a bit. Now, don't get me wrong, things will never play out identically from one game to another, but you'll tend to see a lot of the same beats, so I found after about 5 games, I was like, yeah, that's what solo has to offer, and I was really focusing on playing competitive. And finally, for my number 1, I have a pro, but it could be a mix or a con for you, and that's the dice resolution. Because there is combat in this game, there are the Tripoli pirates trying to raid your shipping lanes, and it all comes down to oodles of D6s. And generally speaking, successes are tied to just a 6. Now, for those of you who watch my reviews a lot, you might be surprised this is a pro, because usually I would have this as a mix, because this is a very swingy system. Things can go terribly for one player or amazingly and totally change up the game, but that's why I kept this as a pro for me. Because going back to my number 2 for a moment, the main thing keeping the game from getting stale and repetitive are these dice rolls, and the fact that you might have a very different position in a game based on how this battle goes one game compared to another. And at the same time, even though having only 6s succeed can be a bummer when you don't roll them, it also gives such a great tension and excitement when you do that's hard to replicate by having a more balanced, consistent system. Overall, I think Shores of Tripoli could be great for non-war gamers who want to kind of dip their toes into the systems and see how card-driven games work. I also think it could be fun for gamers who like quick battles, die resolutions, tough resource management, and card choices. But on the other hand, you might want to avoid this one if you don't like die luck because there is a lot of it. You also might want to avoid it if you want tons of faction variety and just varied play in general in your games. This one tends to follow familiar routes. But hey, if you want some help deciding and want to see the game in action, click the link that just popped up. Good gaming, and I'll see you at the next stop.